0 seconds. Most Americans expect their worst earthquakes in California. The San Andreas is famous. Almost nobody thinks about the fault system buried beneath Missouri, Arkansas, Tennessee, and Kentucky. In the winter of 1811 and 1812, the new Madrid Seismic Zone produced a sequence of enormous earthquakes that destroyed settlements across the Mississippi Valley. It deformed the landscape, disrupted the river itself, and sent shaking across much of the eastern United States. Church bells rang in Boston. People felt the ground move in Washington, D.C. The tremors reached Canada. The fault is the same one. What's different is that 15 million people now live on top of it, on the same soft river sediment that made those original earthquakes so destructive. And the bridges, pipelines, highways, and railways running through the Mississippi Valley carry the freight that keeps the American economy moving. Tonight, while the valley sleeps, the ground beneath it starts to move. 1 second later, the rupture tears north faster than any warning can follow. Rock several miles underground slips suddenly near northeastern Arkansas. The fault breaks along its southern section and races toward the Missouri Boot Heel at several kilometers per second. Above it, the flat valley deforms in thousands of places at once. Roads crack, buried pipes snap, riverbanks shift. Saturated ground begins losing its strength before anyone on the surface understands what's happening. Near Blytheville, homes are thrown from their foundations. Drivers on I-55 feel what they assume is a tire blowout before the pavement starts visibly moving beneath them. Emergency calls go out, but the dispatch centers nearest the fault are already losing power, 5 seconds later. The towns closest to the rupture begin collapsing. New Madrid, Missouri, the town that gave the fault its name, has a few thousand people in older brick construction lining its main streets. Those brick facades come off almost instantly. Wood frame homes slide from foundations or lose their support walls. A water tower topples. Grain bins buckle and spill across roads. Railway embankments slump beneath moving freight cars. Residents who run outside are struck by falling chimneys and glass. People sheltering in doorframes find the doorframes are part of walls that are no longer attached to anything. 10 seconds later. The entire river valley starts behaving like liquid. The Mississippi Valley sits on water-saturated sand and sediment deposited over thousands of years of flooding. Under intense shaking, that material loses its strength. The ground stops acting like solid earth and starts flowing. It doesn't need to split open to destroy everything built on it. Buildings simply lose the ground holding them up. Water and sand fountains erupt through roads and fields across eastern Arkansas, western Tennessee, and southeastern Missouri. House foundations tilt as soil flows sideways. Rail tracks bend into long curves. Underground water, sewage, and gas lines snap. Bridge approaches sink even when the central spans are intact. The bridge is fine, but the road leading onto it has dropped into the ground and you can't drive onto it anymore. Somewhere in the dark, someone posts on social media that Memphis has already been destroyed, and the strongest waves haven't reached Memphis yet. 20 seconds later, Memphis is struck. The thick sediments beneath the city do exactly what geologists have been warning about for decades. They amplify and prolong the shaking, turning a distant rupture into something that feels close and sustained. Beale Street fills with brick, glass, and collapsing signs. Older warehouses near the river lose walls and roofs. Apartment buildings with weak ground floors. Open parking garages at street level drop onto those floors. Inside FedEx Forum, ceiling sections and lighting rigs fall. The Memphis riverfront begins slumping toward the water. People leaving bars run into falling masonry. Some duck back inside clubs because the sounds of collapsing buildings outside resemble gunfire, and the street seems more dangerous than staying put. Drivers stop beneath overpasses, exactly the wrong place to be. Others accelerate through dead traffic signals and don't see the cracks opening in the road ahead of them. 45 seconds later. The sustained shaking turns initial damage into collapse. Buildings that survived the first movements are struck repeatedly from different directions as wave energy bounces through the soft sediment beneath the city. Unreinforced brick walls collapse outward. Older apartment blocks lose exterior walls and stairwells. Hospital corridors fill with debris as emergency power kicks in. People trapped in upper floors try to descend staircases that no longer connect to the floors below. The Hernando de Soto Bridge and the Memphis, Arkansas Bridge, the two main highway crossings of the Mississippi at Memphis, experience violent motion their approaches can't handle. Expansion joints separate. One crossing loses a span, the other stays standing but is twisted and completely impassable. Vehicles fall with the failed roadway. I-40, one of the primary freight corridors connecting the East Coast to the West Coast, is severed at the Mississippi River. A freight train derails near a damaged river crossing. Its cars are carrying fuel and industrial chemicals. The fire is visible for miles. 1 minute later, the Mississippi River reacts to the shifting ground beneath it. Riverbanks collapse into the water. Large waves move upstream and downstream simultaneously. Local stretches appear to run backward temporarily. Not the entire river reversing, which is the myth that's already spreading online, but violent hydraulic chaos from collapsing banks and moving riverbed disrupting the normal current. Barges tear from moorings and collide. Port facilities tilt as saturated ground spreads toward the water. Sections of levee crack and slump. People gather on damaged embankments to film the river and are forced back when the bank collapses beneath them. False reports claiming a tsunami is heading toward New Orleans are spreading faster than anyone can correct them. 90 seconds later. The main shock ends. After more than a minute of severe shaking, the ground finally slows. Dust hangs above Memphis, fires glow across the valley. Entire communities near the fault are partly flattened. Roads, bridges, railways, utilities, and communications have failed simultaneously across several states. Survivors shout for silence so they can hear people calling from under rubble. Groups of residents who found each other in the dark are already pulling people from collapsed walls before any professional crews arrive. Armed store owners are guarding damaged businesses. Gas leaks are igniting across the city. 5 minutes later, fires are spreading and there is almost no water pressure to fight them. Broken gas mains are burning across several Memphis neighborhoods. A pipeline rupture outside the city has produced a large industrial fire. Fire hydrants are producing almost nothing. The water mains feeding them ruptured during the shaking, and whatever pressure remained has drained. Emergency vehicles can't reach most of the fires because the roads between them are blocked by collapsed structures, broken pavement, and liquefied sections that swallow tires. The fire departments know exactly where the fires are. They can't get there. 15 minutes later. The shaking has reached far beyond Memphis, and the rest of the country is having its own version of the same night. In St. Louis, brick facades and chimneys are collapsing in older neighborhoods. Industrial buildings near the riverfront are failing. The Gateway Arch is standing. It was specifically engineered with seismic flexibility. But the riverfront below it is evacuated, and the monument is closed for structural inspection. In Nashville, older masonry in the entertainment district is coming apart. Streets are covered in glass, and several bridges and elevated roads have closed. In Louisville and Evansville, old brick buildings are taking heavy damage, and Ohio River crossings are shut. In Chicago, 350 miles from the fault, tall buildings are swaying noticeably. Elevators have stopped. Water is sloshing in high-rise pools and tanks. The structural damage is limited, but the panic is not. Residents who feel their buildings moving and can't reach anyone by phone are concluding, incorrectly, that a local fault has ruptured beneath them. In Washington, D.C., long, slow waves move through the old continental crust. Some buildings evacuate. Isolated cracks and fallen objects are reported. The city is not seriously damaged, but it's receiving a flood of false reports claiming federal buildings have collapsed. The country now understands this is not only a Memphis disaster. 1 hour later, the central transport network of the United States has fractured. Major sections of I-40, I-55, I-57, and I-24 are closed. Collapsed overpasses, damaged bridges, liquefied approaches. The rail corridors through Memphis and the Missouri Booth Heel have stopped entirely. Mississippi River navigation has halted, with the Corps of Engineers refusing to clear barge traffic until the river bottom and remaining bridge structures are assessed. Oil and gas pipelines crossing the seismic region have shut down automatically after pressure drops. including the ones that supply the Midwest and parts of the East Coast. Rescue convoys being assembled in Tennessee and Arkansas are stopped miles from Memphis because the roads they need simply don't exist in their previous form. Gas stations outside the disaster zone are running out within minutes as people buy far more fuel than they need. 3 hours later, sections of the levee system are failing. The Mississippi levees were already holding high water when the earthquake hit. The river was running near flood stage, which meant the levees were already under load before the shaking added liquefaction and lateral spreading to the equation. Most major levees don't collapse simultaneously, but several weakened segments crack and slump enough for water to push through. Floodwater enters sections of the Missouri boot heel. Low roads near the Bird's Point, New Madrid floodway disappear underwater. Damaged pumping stations have stopped removing water from areas that depend on constant pumping to stay dry. Families who survived the shaking intact are now on rooftops watching water rise. Rescue boats are being diverted from collapsed buildings in Memphis to flooded communities in the Bootheel. Both needs are real. There aren't enough boats for either. 6 hours later, a magnitude 6.7 aftershock hits. On its own, a magnitude 6.7 would be a significant earthquake, enough to cause serious damage in a normal city. Here it strikes buildings that have been shaking for 6 hours and have almost no structural reserve left. A partially collapsed apartment building in Memphis comes down completely. Additional masonry failures occur across New Madrid and Blytheville. Rescue workers retreat from unstable rubble. A bridge approach that survived the main shock slides into the river. In the shelter that had been set up inside a large building near downtown Memphis, people run. They don't go back inside, they sleep in the parking lot, in the street, wherever they are when the shaking stops. The rumor that the M8 was only a foreshock and that a M9 is coming before morning spreads on every platform with signal. Most of those people will spend the night waiting for an earthquake that never arrives. Nobody knows that yet. One day later, by morning, the full picture is visible from the air. Collapsed districts in Memphis, widespread liquefaction from Arkansas into Missouri, damaged river crossings, industrial fires, flooded lowlands, broken highways and railways spreading across the center of the United States. Federal resources are moving, but approaching through long detours because the direct routes are the ones that are closed. River freight has stopped along a major section of the Mississippi, one of the busiest commercial waterways in the world. Rail cargo is rerouting through congested corridors, adding days to everything those trains carry. Fuel deliveries are slowing toward the Midwest and Northeast. Fraudsters have launched fake survivor funds. Separately, online volunteers are building accurate missing person and open road databases faster than some official systems. Both things are real, happening simultaneously. 3 days later, the infrastructure crisis is now killing people who survived the shaking without injury. Water systems remain contaminated. Hospitals are rationing supplies. Rural communities cut off by bridge and levee failures have received almost nothing from outside. Dialysis patients are being airlifted to functioning facilities hours away. Insulin and blood supplies are being kept cold through improvised means. Ambulances are refueling from guarded emergency reserves that are running low. At some distribution points, fights break out. In most neighborhoods, residents have organized shared kitchens, supply watches, and informal medical checks. The communities that are managing are largely the ones where people knew their neighbors before the earthquake. The ones that didn't are harder. Pharmacies and electronics stores with collapsed storefronts are being emptied in some neighborhoods. In others, residents have organized their own watches and are turning people away at the block. Both things are happening in the same city, sometimes on the same street. 1 week later, Memphis, New Madrid, Blytheville, and dozens of smaller communities still have extensive collapse zones. St. Louis, Little Rock, and Nashville are functioning, but each has damaged buildings, displaced residents, and overloaded hospitals. One Memphis highway crossing remains partially collapsed. Others are under restriction or closed. Temporary ferries and military bridging are moving limited traffic, nowhere near the volume those crossings carried before. Rail traffic is diverted hundreds of miles around the broken sections, adding days to freight that normally moves overnight. Damaged levees are still being reinforced. Pipeline service has partially returned through selected routes. The large shelters, stadium parking lots, fairgrounds, school gyms are tense and overcrowded. Families are leaving for Texas, Georgia, Illinois, anywhere with housing and a way to reach it. 2 weeks later. Engineers are finding that some of the damage can't be repaired. It has to be accepted as permanent. Neighborhoods where liquefaction tilted entire blocks. Sections of highway that moved laterally enough that the road needs to be relocated, not patched. Flooded boot heel communities accessible only by boat until levee reconstruction finishes. Homes that look intact but are condemned because their foundations have rotated underground. Some towns are beginning formal discussions about whether to rebuild where they are, on ground that liquefied and flooded and may do so again, or whether to relocate to higher terrain. That conversation sounds straightforward until you explain what it actually means. Telling a community that the place they've lived for generations isn't safe to go back to. 1 month later. The earthquake lasted less than 2 minutes. A month later, the center of the United States is still trying to reconnect. Large parts of downtown Memphis remain closed. Multiple older buildings are awaiting demolition. The damaged riverfront is still unstable. Tens of thousands of people cannot return home and have no timeline for when they can. One major bridge may require reconstruction measured in years, not months. Freight that used to move through this corridor overnight is taking days on alternate routes, and the cost of that delay is showing up in prices across the country. The Missouri boot heel communities that flooded are still largely displaced. Aftershocks continue. Smaller, but frequent enough that nobody fully trusts the ground. A magnitude 6.0 hit in the third week brought down buildings under repair and reset parts of the recovery timeline for the second time. The new Madrid Seismic Zone was not on most people's list of things to worry about. California has the famous fault. California has the building codes and the preparedness culture and the institutional memory of living next to something dangerous. The central United States built its cities, bridges, pipelines, and railways on the assumption that the ground beneath them was stable. The fault didn't need to split the country in half. It only needed to break the connections holding it together.